one, go.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you to the 2021 edition of the Energy and Resources Institute's annual flagship event, the World Sustainable Development Summit, being held virtually under the broad theme of redefining our common future, safe and secure environment for all, from 10th to 12th February 2021. This edition of the WSDS marks 20 years of the platform, and it is a matter of great pride for all of us at TERI that all of you, speakers and delegates, have been able to join us for this important milestone edition. Your support is instrumental in the success of the platform and all of our efforts. With this, I'm delighted to welcome you all to the thematic track titled Harnessing the Socio-Economic Benefits of Renewable Energy for Making the Paris Agreement a Success for the Planet and the People. This virtual dialogue, through the contextual underpinnings provided in the new policy report published by the Energy and Resources Institute, TERI, and the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies, will seek to present key findings on the socio-economic opportunities and and co-benefits related to different renewable energy pathways for India, along with challenges and policy options to realize these opportunities for the people of India. I would like to request all the speakers and the delegates who are on video that whenever you're not talking, please keep your microphone on mute. And with this, I would now like to invite my colleague, Neha Pahuja from TERI, to deliver a presentation on the insights from the Co-Benefits India Policy Report, which has been prepared by TERI and the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies. Over to you, Neha.
Neha, you need to unmute yourself.
Neha, we cannot hear you. I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Aishwarya, for introducing us. As you all know, that India is in the midst of an energy transition, and this energy transition would have large socioeconomic benefits depending upon the pathway that we choose. So it was around the early 2017 that we initiated a project with Institute of Advanced Sustainability Studies and other institutions in India, and which was supported by ICI. And that in this project we sort of studied co-benefits of decarbonization pathways that India would undertake and renewable energy to be precise. So, and earlier this year we came out with a policy synthesis report titled Harnessing Co-Benefits for Making Paris Agreement a Success for the Planet and People of India. In this event, we would be presenting some of the key policy opportunities that we have highlighted as part of the report. In this report, we had stressed what kind of policy actions we can initiate and make Paris Agreement a success, and also as we transition to renewable energy. And out of the co-benefits that we can accrue, we highlighted that besides achieving the targets of under the Paris Agreement, we would also be able to make it. I mean, there are benefits that could help us achieve sustainable development goals, and thus it should be the cornerstone of our NDC. So I highlight some of the opportunities here. One was the kind of jobs that would be generated. So we identified, or we sort of quantified that we can almost double power sector jobs by the year 2030. And in order that we are able to seize this opportunity, we need trained workforce, and we need future workers, men and women who are aptly trained to take up skilled as well as unskilled jobs, and we are able to seize this opportunity. Besides this, we also looked at the health benefits since we were in the middle of the ongoing pandemic, and we were able to identify that we have already unburdened our health system if we go on the energy transition pathway, and we can accrue benefits of more than 2 lakh crores until 2050. If under the ambitious policy scenario that we have developed, we thought the economic savings would more than double as we go along. Now, I would also like to hand over to the project coordinator or project director internationally, Dr. Sebastian Helgenberger, to give his views on the policy synthesis report that we just launched. Dr. Sebastian, please.
Thank you, Neha, and thanks, Madam Chair, and also welcome all the participants, and thanks for joining us today. So we gave this session the title, Making the Paris Agreement a Success for the Planet and the People. And why did we do that? We did that because through our research activities in India and also worldwide in the Co-Benefits project, we understand that the Paris Agreement is not only a framework for globally coordinated action to protect and secure the livelihoods for our children and their children on this beautiful planet. But the Paris Agreement is also a document of opportunity, an opportunity for the people and the countries that are committed to achieving the targets of the Paris Agreement. And this is also what the Global Co-Benefits project under the International Climate Initiative of Germany is substantiating through a series of assessment reports, through policy dialogues, and also through an international training program. So when we say that the Paris Agreement is a document of opportunity, we sincerely believe that India is a role model in creating these opportunities. We see that India is a global leader and a role model for the social and the economic opportunities which are connected to decarbonizing our industry, decarbonizing economies, and making the shift towards a green and prosperous green future. So the report we're presenting today and the presentation by the research teams, by the way, each of them a true leader in their field of expertise, they are giving testimony to these co-benefits for the society and the economy. And also in that opening, I truly would like to acknowledge also the strong partnership of the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies and TERI in co-leading this process. And also would like to express my gratitude to the research teams of CEW, of the Skill Council, and also of TERI. And I'm very happy that all of them are joining us here today also in the panel. The co-benefits process, the process of the co-benefits project and the report for India, it builds on a very strong political partnership. It builds on a very strong cross-ministerial dialogue with our ministerial council, which involved MOEFCC, MNRE, Ministry of Finance, NITI Aayog, under the chairmanship of TERI and ISS. And I was very glad that MNRE, that Ministry of Finance, NITI Aayog, are with us here today on the panel. So what did we do in these policy dialogues? What did we discuss also with ministries and stakeholders across India through the last years of the Co-Benefits project? What we did was, we didn't only assess and quantify the socio-economic co-benefits of shifting towards a green energy future in India. We also identified and spelled out a set of high impact actions which will help the government to maximize the co-benefits for people, for communities, and for businesses. And together with the key findings of our co-benefits assessment for India, these high impact actions for government ministries are being described in the co-benefits policy reports that we're presenting today. So when we've identified the co-benefits of implementing the Paris Climate Agreement for the people, shouldn't we be talking about it? And the answer to the question, which we think is a clear yes, is in fact one of the recommendations that this report is providing. A recommendation to include the opportunities of climate actions into the NDCs and making also the co-benefits a part of the government's pledge to the planet and its people. This is also what we put on this slide, the NDC action number 4.1, which you will find in our co-benefits policy report, along with other recommendations. So let me invite you to take a look at this report, which is published by Terry in ISS, and let us know how it resonates. Also feel free to do this via Twitter. We put the Twitter handle and suggested a hashtag on the slide here. So very happy also to be in the discussion with you during the session and also after the session. Again, thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us here today. I'm looking forward to other presentations and the conversations in the panel, and back to our chairwoman, Aishwarya.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Neha, for your presentation. Before we proceed ahead, I would like to request the WS team, WSD Terry, to please play a brief video on co-benefits of renewables for India. Do we have the keys? I would request you to please play the video. Thank you very much. We would now proceed ahead with the short presentations, beginning with Dr. Anju Goel from TERI, who will be presenting on the theme of improving health and reducing costs through renewable energy. Dr. Goel, over to you.
Thank you, Aishwarya. I will now be sharing my screen. Can anyone confirm? Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, today I'll be discussing the case study that we have conducted on improving health and reducing cost with renewable energy. As we have seen in the video also, and we all are well aware that ambient air pollution is the second leading health risk factor in India. And power sector indeed is an important contributor to the ambient air pollution, especially at the local scale, since most of the electricity generation in the country is coal-based. We are well aware that India's nationally determined contributions aim to base 40% of the total installed power generation capacity on non-fossil fuel resources by 2030. So the aim of this study was to assess the range of the additional benefits resulting from a low carbon energy transition in India. In this study, we have quantified the specific impact of Indian power sector, especially assessing the health benefits of increased shares of renewables in Indian energy and power sector. We have also estimated economic savings which will result from improvements in air quality. And the results are being analyzed on 3 different energy scenarios for the years 2020, 2030, 2040 and 2050. The 3 different energy scenarios that were considered for the study were business as usual scenario, the NDC scenario and the NDC plus scenario. So business as usual scenario represented the India's present climate policy rolled out until 2016. NDC scenario was designed to chart out the strategies needed to achieve the targets laid out in India's NDC. And the NDC plus scenario was adopting strategy for a deeper decarbonization over and above the NDC scenario. The methodology followed for the study is shown here in this slide. So first we created energy scenarios, then we did emission modeling by using Gaines Asia model. Those emissions were fed into the air quality model to obtain gridded air quality concentration at the national scale. Thereafter, we estimated human health impacts based on the dose response coefficients, and thereafter the cost estimation was done by using the household health expenditure survey data. So the key results from the study are shown here. So the first graph shows basically a population weighted mean PM 2.5 concentration in 3 different scenarios over the year 2020, 2030, 2040 and 2050. First of all, as we can see in this graph, all the time the mean concentration was very well above the WHO recommended mean annual PM 2.5 limit in all the 3 scenarios. In BAU scenario, we expect a slight increase in the concentration, while in NDC and NDC plus scenario, the PM 2.5 concentration has shown a decline. If we talk about specifically from the PM 2.5 or 10 concentrations from a thermal power plant, so first of all, the contribution of the thermal power plant at the national scale was limited since this sector is highly controlled. And if we will see again, if we compare the concentration in 3 different scenarios over the different years, so we see a decline of around 10% in concentration in BAU scenario during the year 2020 and 2050. There is a decline of around 18% in NDC scenario in PM 2.5 concentration from power sector, and there is a decline of around 59% in NDC plus scenario.
Anju, sorry to disconnect here.
Yes.
Anju, if I may just take a moment here, I think your slideshow also needs to be in full screen format. And I am getting from a few viewers that the volume needs to probably go up a bit.
Okay. Is it now in a full screen format?
It hasn't yet changed for me. If the Keystone people could just confirm from the platform.
It has not changed, but let's go ahead. Yes.
Well, I have kept it on a full screen mode only on my laptop. I don't know, there might be some problem with the app.
No worries, Anju. You can proceed ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. So here this graph shows the all-cause mortality due to the PM 2.5 or PM 10 exposure in different scenarios during 2020 to 2050. So if we talk about BAU scenario, so all-cause mortality is gonna increase quite significantly from 50,000 annual death in the year 2020 to 830,000 annual death in the year 2050. If we talk about, and again looking at the trajectory, NDC scenario again shows a smaller decline as compared to the BAU scenario. And if we talk about NDC plus scenario, in the year 2050, we can expect a decline of around 25% in mortalities as compared to the BAU scenario in the year 2050, and there would be a decline of around 17% with respect to the NDC scenario in the year 2050. So we have done the total economic loss estimation also for the disease, for the mortality and the morbidity due to the diseases COPD, lower respiratory tract infection, lung cancer, and the ischemic heart diseases. So we can see here that the total economic loss was estimated to be around 4.6 trillion INR in the year 2020, and it's gonna increase more than tenfold by the year 2050 in BAU scenario. A smaller decline of around 2 trillion INR can be expected if we follow the NDC pathway, and if we will follow the NDC plus pathway, which is much more ambitious, so we can save somewhere around 12 trillion INR rupees. So the key policy messages that we got from the study was India can significantly cut economic losses by greening the economy and deploying the renewable energy resources. As I've already shown, by following the NDC plus pathway, we can save somewhere around 12 trillion INR rupees in 2050 with respect to the BAU scenario. And the second policy message that we got was India should consider building and following even more ambitious energy pathways. Because as we have seen, irrespective of the scenario we followed, the total mortality has increased by the year 2050, and we were not able to meet the ambient air quality standards. So definitely we need to follow much more ambitious energy pathways. Thank you.
Thank you, Anju, for your presentation. We have Dr. Mathur here from TERI, so I would now like to invite Dr. Ajay Mathur, the Director General of TERI, to give the special remarks.
Colleagues, it's such a pleasure to welcome all of you. This is the first session in this year's the 2021 World Sustainable Development Summit, and I'm delighted that we are focusing on the issue of the co-benefits of renewable energy. In fact, sometimes I wonder whether we have the argument the other way around, because what we have seen is that renewable energy has been pushed in India because of the here and now benefits, and climate is a strong co-benefit. But it doesn't matter. The two go together. We are delighted that many countries are now coming up with net zero plans. We have seen EU's political commitment to be climate neutral by 2050. We have seen Japan and South Korea pledge to be carbon neutral by 2050. And at last year's UN summit, we heard China announce that it planned to achieve net zero emissions by 2060. These are all important issues. We hope that together with these long-term goals, there are also pathways on how we can meet these goals. And obviously, renewables is today, not yesterday, but today, the low-hanging fruit in reaching those goals. In 2015, India we were quite ambitious in saying that 40% of our electricity generation capacity would come from non-fossil fuels, that's largely variable renewables, by 2040. And it now seems that we may very well reach that goal possibly in 2022 or way before we reach our 2030 year. And the Prime Minister has announced that for 2030 we are looking at 450 gigawatts of renewable energy. This means that approximately 42, 43, 44% of electricity at that time would be coming from renewables, from non-fossil fuel sources of energy. Now this is big. What it implies is that we have a very large shift in the economy moving us towards lower carbon fuels, which could become the platform for larger scale change. I believe that these kinds of short-term, well, it's not short-term, but a medium-term goals and targets are as important as the longer-term goal of net neutrality. I think the two go together. You have to know where you're going and you have to know the way by which you're going there. When we made these targets in 2015, they were ambitious, as I said, and it turned out that amongst the G20 countries, we were the only country whose targets, 2030 targets, met our 2-degree centigrade pathway. No other country came anywhere near that. I think we will need to ensure that we continue to provide the global leadership that is needed for all countries of the world to move towards energy efficiency. Renewables, as I said, apart from energy efficiency, provides us with the tools to meet this lower term, lowering of the emissions, as well as the benefits that go with it. Now, together, we have produced the co-benefits report, and the co-benefits report looks at the kinds of health, the kinds of energy access, the kinds of employment opportunity benefits that occur with the growth of renewable energy. Now this, I believe, is what makes this attractive. Because as far as politicians are concerned, it is the here and now benefits that matter. We are looking at how this will create jobs, how this will create economic growth, and how would it lead to the kinds of health benefits that Anju was talking about a moment ago. So, what is clear is that if we would like this kind of renewable energy growth, we will need a huge number of trained workers. Numbers suggest that we would need about 180,000 trained workers in order to meet these renewable energy goals. And I'm delighted that Mr. Praveen Saxena, who heads the Green Skills Mission, is here with us today. We completely realize that the financial and social benefits of renewables have to be continuously repeated at various levels, at the level of local politicians, at the level of states, at the central level, and at the level of communities, in order that we are able to reap the benefits of it. Because what is true is that while the overall costs of renewable energy today are actually less than those of fossil fuel-based energy, there is a problem which relates to the fact that the capital costs of renewable energy are a little bit higher. And therefore, people need, in a sense, to have the kind of comfort that they are investing in a technology which will provide them with larger benefits. We are proud in India to be a leader in renewable energy policy and renewable energy implementation. We look forward to working with people across the world to see how this particular push can be encouraged, how it can be advanced, and how we can all benefit from growth in the renewable energy area. I look forward to all of us to see how we can move ahead in this particular area. And by all of us, I mean the world can move together in this area. And I think the issue of co-benefits is what drives action here and in your own country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable remarks. I think we can proceed ahead with the short presentations and continue with Mrs. Rashmi Murali from TERI, who will be presenting on the theme of secure and reliable electricity access with renewable energy mini grids in rural India. Rashmi, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope my presentation is visible. Can anyone confirm?
Yes. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Rashmi Murali, Associate Fellow with TERI, and I, along with my colleagues, were part of this study on reliable and secure electricity access through renewable energy mini-grids in rural India. We undertook this study for the overall co-benefit study of TERI in 2018. So the objective of the study was to examine the business case for scaling up solar mini-grids in India. And this becomes important in the context of India's fast evolving grid electrification scenario, where the government aims to ensure electricity access to each and every household of the country. And in that context, how mini grids become relevant and what is the scope for scaling them up in order to provide reliable and clean energy in rural areas. So that was the aim of our study. Particularly, we had three objectives. The first was to examine the current nature of co-benefits delivered by mini-grids as compared to the grid, and this we accomplished through a case study approach. Second was to determine the scope and feasibility of scaling up mini-grids through a cost of supply and tariff analysis with respect to the grid. And third was to highlight the economies of scale for benefits of medium-scale mini-grids and associated co-benefits. So we devised three research questions, specific research questions, and had a methodology for each of them. So the first research question was, what value and level of services do solar mini grids currently deliver to end users? And for this, we conducted a household survey of 198 households in Hardoi district of Uttar Pradesh, and where we studied a mini grid by a developer. It was a 27 kilowatt mini grid connecting 2 villages, and we also studied a village which had grid connectivity. So why was Uttar Pradesh selected? Because at the time of the study, it had a relatively low household electrification rate of 66%. Also, it had the largest number of private sector mini grids operational in India. And the third reason was that it had a dedicated mini grid policy also. So the second research question is, what does it really cost to provide energy services through solar mini grids? So for this, we conducted stakeholder consultations. Secondary literature was thoroughly reviewed, and we modeled an LCOE analysis through Excel using formats that were available through CERC. Financial analysis was done, and we also took norms that were prevalent in the industry by talking to various developers. And the third research question is, at what scale can solar mini grids provide additional co-benefits and still be viable? So for this, again, we went back to the LCOE analysis. For that, we took the base case of 27 kilowatt mini grid and tried scaling it up to 100, 500, 700, and 1 megawatt to see what does it actually cost to supply electricity at these scales. And then we compared it to what the cost of supply was for the grid in that area. So the key results and policy messages that came from the study are, firstly, the mini grid that we studied was able to provide reliable and quality power supply as compared to the grid, even though the level of services was limited to lighting and mobile charging only. So the messages that we derive from this is that, first, capacity is key. If mini grids need to move beyond providing just basic lighting and mobile charging to households and compete with the grid in terms of level of services, capacity needs to be augmented. Secondly, beyond the household supply, it is important for mini grids to be able to serve public institutions like schools, health centers, banks, mobile towers, etc., for a community level solution. Thirdly, as we found from our analysis that even though the cost of supply for the grid and for a scaled up mini grid theoretically was able to match at some point, but still the consumers ended up paying much less for a grid as compared to mini grid. So this is done because of cross subsidy like benefits that are given to domestic grid consumers. So if such benefits can be extended to mini grid consumers as well, it would support the affordability. Then scaling up mini grids makes it more cost effective for developers and affordable to consumers. And lastly, mini grids have the potential to become natural extensions of the centralized grid rather than the alternative, because in today's scenario, grid is reaching almost every place of the country. So in that case, but reliability continues to be an issue in some places. So in such cases, these mini grids, scaled up mini grids could contribute by augmenting the quality of supply and reliability of supply. Thank you. That's it from my side.
Thank you, Rashmi, for your presentation. I would now like to call upon Mr. Neeraj Kuldeep from the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, who will be presenting on the theme of future skills and job creation with renewable energy. Over to you, Neeraj.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Aishwarya. I hope I'm visible and audible to all. Let me quickly share my presentation as well. Please let me know if it is visible to all.
Yes, we can see it, Neeraj.
Yeah, thanks once again. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neeraj Kuldeep, and I'm working with the Council on Energy, Environment and Water as a program lead. Council on Energy, Environment and Water is one of South Asia's leading policy research institution. We work across 7 different focus areas, which includes energy access, renewable energy, power sector, risk and mitigation, and also looking at technology, finance, and we have also have a dedicated center for energy finance. This particular research piece was part of the renewable energy team, where we have been for many years trying to look at the employment creation potential through renewable energy technologies. And as part of this project, we tried to use some of those learnings and compare it with the power sector as well, to see whether there would be net increase in the employment, because once we switch from conventional technologies to renewable energy technologies, we would be losing jobs in the conventional sector, but then there would be additional jobs that would be created in the renewable energy sector. So understanding what would be the net employment in the power sector as a whole, as India switches from conventional to more renewables. And to that extent, one of the objective of this study was to develop the employment factors so that we can compare all these different renewable energy technologies, because the labor intensity and the nature of workforce would also be quite different for these different technologies. And then we try to project these employment over a period of next 30 years up to 2050. And then as part of these projections, we have tried to capture the climate mitigation and renewable energy deployment scenarios that India is likely to adopt going forward in this time frame. And to that extent, we have created 4 scenarios as part of this study. The first scenario is business as usual, which accounts for all the energy efficiency as well as the renewable energy targets announced up to 2016, which also includes then the 175 gigawatt target. Then we have a nationally determined contribution NDC scenario, which accounts for India's commitment as part of NDCs. Then we have third scenario, which is NDC plus, where India is intended to upscale their efforts and focus more on deep decarbonization. And the last scenario is on India's contribution towards limiting the global temperature rise below 2 degrees by 2100. So moving on, next, the methodology which we adopted for this study, actually we have tried to capture the entire value chain, which includes equipment manufacturing, fuel supply, generation, and transmission. Transmission and distribution, because it's on the load side or on the consumption side, would remain the same irrespective of how or which technology is generating the electricity, and especially the variations would take place on the generation front, because that's where we are setting up these power plants for electricity generation. And in terms of the nature of work, these could be defined either in the form of direct employment, indirect employment, and the induced employments. So direct employment would be people who are involved either in the fuel sourcing stage or in the generation stage. Similarly, indirect employment would be people involved in the manufacturing of different components and equipments that goes into setting up these power plants, be it thermal power plants or renewable energy power plants. And then as a ripple effect of increased employment in the sector and the incomes, there are induced jobs. As part of this study, we are only focusing on the direct jobs, where we are trying to compare these different technologies. And since when we talk about the conventional sector, these are people are full-time employees, whereas in the renewable energy sector, much of the employment is during the construction phase, which are the short-term and part-time jobs. So to have apple-to-apple comparison, we have we are using or defining these employment coefficients on full-time equivalent basis. So we translate all these short-term jobs into full-time equivalent based on the data that we have gathered from various industrial players. moving on, in terms of the key learnings from the study, what we have observed is, as India focuses more on renewable energy, the net employment in the power sector would be much higher compared to only focusing on the conventional capacities, and the net employment could reach to 3.5 million by 2050. And as I mentioned, the with the higher focus on the renewable energies, the employment would be 52% more between 22 and 2050, as India switches from conventional to more renewable energy based electricity generation. And the another key aspect of the renewable energy sector is that DRE, or the distributed renewable energies, be it rooftop solar or biomass, is much more labor intensive, and they create 25 times more jobs than the conventional sector. So we can create a lot more jobs, and since these distributed technologies or deployments would be taking place all across the India, we have the opportunity to take these jobs to each and every corner of India, be it rural India, semi-urban localities, and even in the urban sector. However, we really need to utilize or harness these jobs. We also need to focus on skilling these employees who would be employed in the renewable energy sector, and that is going to be a tough uphill task for the sector. So these were some of the learnings from the study, and with that I'll close my presentation. Thank you so much. Aishwarya, over to you.
Thank you, Neeraj, for your presentation. We shall now move forward towards the third part of our thematic track, which would be a discussion by Mr. R.R. Rashmi, sir. Mr. Rashmi is a distinguished fellow and program director at TERI and has erstwhile been India's principal negotiator for climate change under the UNFCCC and the special secretary in the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in the Government of India, apart from other eminent capacities held by him over the years. Sir, I would hand it over to you from here on.
Thank you very much, Aishwarya, and a very good afternoon to all of you. Let me first welcome all the panelists and today's participants in this discussion on the co-benefits of the renewable energy program for India, and as well as the global progress towards climate change that we all aspire for. It is important that we all understand the entire range of implications of the renewable energy issues involved. We have already launched a very ambitious program of energy transition in India. The NDC of India includes a very substantial energy ambition. It has a goal of creating 40% generation capacity from renewables in the total electricity power generation. And as Dr. Mathur was pointing out in his initial remarks, the progress is extremely good, very, very positive, and very, very encouraging. But the question is, when we look at the global goal of the Paris Agreement, energy and the emissions are at the center of the entire discussion, which is when we make an energy transition from conventional coal-based or fossil fuel-based energy generation to renewables, there is an implication for not only energy consumption but also for long-term growth. So the question which we wanted to understand through the study that was launched by TERI along with its stakeholders, does it also have similar positive implications on other parameters of growth? We have several sustainable developmental goals to be achieved in course of next 10 years. We have, practically all the goals, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, all of them have large implications for social and economic development of the country, in addition to what we have in terms of emissions intensity reduction and climate change. which is SDG 13. So we found that in course of this research work, as the researchers have pointed out, that on these three parameters, pollution and health, jobs and incomes, as well as and also the energy access, in all these three areas, the impact of transition from fossil fuel based generation of power to renewable energy is positive, and it's extremely positive and very, very encouraging. And hopefully it will also lead the policy framers and the other stakeholders to invest more in this direction. So when we make this kind of transition, we have to make investments, and we have to look at the short-term costs and the long-term costs. These are evident both in the policy making in terms of the investments and in the kind of fiscal financial measures which the government might take, and the investments which the private sector and the business people who are going to actually make investments in the renewable energy sector, the decisions that they will take will also be impacted by this kind of policy framing. So to discuss all these interrelated issues of the kind of impacts which a movement from conventional fuel-based economy to renewable-based economy and its implications for long-term growth, we have a very distinguished panelists today. We have 6 people representing a wide range of stakeholders today who will be contributing their thoughts to these issues. I have, first of all, Dr. Shekhar Bonu who is the Director General of the Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office in the NITI Aayog, which is the key think tank in the Government of India, and which is also in charge of monitoring the Sustainable Developmental Goals performance of the Government of India and the states. So we'll be hearing from him as to how he looks at this issue. Mr. Dinesh D. Jagdale is the Joint Secretary in the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, which is the key ministry which drives the entire renewable energy ambition in India, and it will be interesting to hear his thoughts. Dr. Praveen Saxena, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Skill Council for Green Jobs, will bring forth his experiences and his perspective on how he looks at the job creation potential of this sector and other implications. Dr. Nisha Mendiratta, she is an old hand on climate change. She is currently the advisor and very senior scientist in the Department of Science and Technology. She has been handling climate change program from the scientific perspective, and she will tell us as to how she looks at this challenge of energy transition, of investing in microgrids, and how this can contribute to the Sustainable Developmental Goals. Mr. Abhishek Acharya from the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance. He's a Joint Director there, and he has been contributing to the climate change policy making from finance angle. So we will get to hear his thoughts as to how he looks at this entire business of renewable energy investments and its impact on the long-term growth of India. Last but not the least, Dr. Sebastian Helgenberger, who has been the brain behind this entire project, and he has been pushing this research work. He is the project director of the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies. He has contributed a lot to this research work, and we will hear from him as to how he looks at this entire project and what kind of lessons do we derive from this research work. So let me welcome all the panelists once again, and without wasting any further time, let me invite Dr. Shekhar Bonu to address the participants. And the question which I would like to put to him, Dr. Bonu, is that as representative of the NITI Aayog, where you are entrusted with the responsibility of monitoring the Sustainable Developmental Goals on all its dimensions, how do you think the kind of research framework which you just saw, the results, how does it gel with the framework developed by the Niti Aayog, and do you find any validity in the conclusions here?
Yeah, thanks, Rashmiji, for the very nice introduction. Before I start, I want to congratulate the researchers, Terry, COBENEFITS, for coming out with a very good report and presentation on socio-economic co-benefits of renewable energy. Here at the government of India is extremely committed to outcomes. The monitoring framework that Niti Aayog uses, as well as Development Monitoring Evaluation Office, which is an attached office of Niti Aayog, which is Apex Monitoring and Evaluation Office, uses an output-outcome monitoring framework and tries to translate or work with the ministries and departments to define clearly smart indicators both for outputs as well as outcomes. So when I look at the framework that has been presented today, I think there's no doubt about it. Renewable has so many direct climate benefits, and especially for a country like India, energy security benefits it accrues, and jobs part, and also the health part of co-benefits which have been stated, and its contribution to sustainable development goals. The challenge here in theory of change, any intervention activities leads to outputs, and outputs lead to outcomes. And some of the things that co-benefits mentioned are within the framework of outcomes, which can be directly linked to the interventions of the ministry of the scheme, the jobs created or the energy generated or import substitution. But there are a few things which probably come in the realm of impacts. Impacts are those which where the scheme or intervention contributes, but there are also many other things which contribute to it, like health benefits, pollution, and so forth. So there are so many reasons for air pollution leading to health. So this is where I think further research would be really required in terms of attributing what part of renewable energy interventions actually lead, and this is probably going to vary from context to context and place to place. In a place where there is a traditional coal power plant, probably things would change, would be different from, let's say, where it's not. So currently, TMEO works with all the various line ministries to come up with a output outcome monitoring framework, which is a part of the budget document. If you go to India budget, you also see an outcomes budget. The main budget has schemes above 500 crores. There are two schemes under MNRE. There's also one scheme, smart cities, where there's some discussion about renewable energy. But as you can clearly see, most of the outcomes are around generation or import substitution, and maybe creation of jobs. You don't see much discussion around health benefits that are accrued, because I think there are two challenges here. One challenge is that of attribution. It's more of a term of impact. Then there are also, even if there are direct benefits, it's also about capturing. I think the government administrative data does a good job in capturing outputs. When it comes to outcomes, many of these things happen within the household. So you need a special survey to capture them. So we need to, it's not just enough to define outcomes, but it's also important to build robust data architectures to capture them and measure them. I'm also happy to let you know that Government of India also measures sector outcomes at a higher level, which also includes accumulation of all the outcomes of various ministries are also measured, which we maintain through our sector dashboard. Honorable Prime Minister himself takes review of these sector dashboards, MNRE, power, coal. These are all part of the sector dashboard. I think I'll stop here, and if there are any specific questions, I'll respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vonu. Thank you for being precise and economical with your time. It's an interesting thought. We will come back to you with your outcome framework and as to what kind of improvement can we make it in the context of renewable energy. Let me now turn to Mr. Jagdale, the Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Renewable Energy. And the question, Mr. Jagdale, which I had for you was that, the Government of India has announced this very ambitious target of 450 gigawatts of energy by renewable energy by 2030. The project says the research conclusions are that we have positive co-benefits in terms of health, energy access, and green jobs through an ambitious program like this. But what is your thought on this? Do you think it can strengthen the sustainable developmental goals really that strongly when we make a change from the conventional fuels? Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. Thank you, Rashmi, sir, Dr. Shekhar Bonu, DGDMO Niti Aayog, all the co-panelists, dignitaries, present, attendees, ladies and gentlemen. It's basically thank you for inviting me to this very important summit. And as Dr. Shekhar said, all the congratulations should go to Ms. Neha, Terry, Dr. Sebastian for the co-benefits policy report, which I presume will give a substantive direction as well. And we at the ministry will try to look at it more closely and try to take the results and have a substantial discussion further on the policy. So, sir, today's conference is just conducted on the backdrop of very important announcement. And I take this opportunity also to announce here as well that the United Nations has announced India, along with Brazil, Colombia, Denmark, Germany, Spain, and United Kingdom, to be acting as a global champion for the high-level dialogue on energy under the theme of energy transition. So India is a key stakeholder in the entire energy transition across the globe. And that gives us the amount of efforts that the government of India has taken for the last decade or several years in order to promote this renewable energy. So if you really look at the Paris Agreement, sir, there are two key commitments that India had made. And you just mentioned about 175 gigawatts. And today, as the year ended of 2020, we have already installed a capacity of 91.15 gigawatts of the total renewable energy, which includes obviously wind, solar, hydro, and biomass as well. And we do have a visibility of almost 50 gigawatts which are under implementation, and 22 gigawatts are at various stages of the tendering. So the initial target which the government of India has set of 175 gigawatts by 2022, we expect that we will be able to reach that, maybe some impact because of the COVID, but more or less, I think that 175 gigawatt target should be very feasible. The 450 gigawatt target, which the Honorable Prime Minister has given us, and by 2030 we have to achieve a 450 gigawatt of entire renewable energy mix. That's again an ambitious target, and we collectively, with the support of all the stakeholders, the states, the distribution companies, utilities, and obviously the consumer, which today has the maximum, is going to achieve the maximum benefit, is going to feel or realize the benefit, the intangible benefits, obviously for the stated benefits as well. With their support, we will be able to derive programs, we will be able to implement such programs to reach that goal. Now, one of the basic factor which has enabled us is the declining cost. Improvement in technology, declining cost, and the massive amount of the scale that India gives. That is what I think has brought down this, has made this renewable energy more penetrative in the grid. Today we are fourth in the world in terms of renewable capacity, fourth and fifth in the world at wind and solar respectively. So this low carbon development strategy obviously is giving benefit in terms of manpower, in terms of jobs, in terms of pollution abatement, in terms of health benefits. And we do believe, Dr. Shekhar suggested that we really don't quantify as an outcome, and that is where I think our efforts, and we all collectively will have to really put on more focus on how can we quantify those benefits into terms of real benefit, so as a common man can understand that by using or by converting or switching to renewable energy, what is that small benefit per unit of electricity can be achieved. And we are trying to evolve what kind of methodology can be adopted to determine this. I also at the ministry lead the bioenergy program, and therefore when such kind of things are happening around us, there are challenges to really suggest and justify all the activities that no. I'm sure such kind of co-benefits that the Terry has been talking about and the researchers have given to us, we need to study it more, sir. But to answer your question, sir, about 450 gigawatts, we need to do a lot. And one such mission that Honorable Prime Minister announced a few days back, and then the budgetary announcement was also made about the hydrogen mission. The National Hydrogen Mission also is being worked at the ministry. I think that this hydrogen is going to make a key enabler for the entire energy transition in related to electricity, related to the energy needs, and obviously the intermittency of renewables, the decarbonization strategy for the industries, the very hardcore, difficult sectors such as steel, cement, fertilizers we will be able to address those issues of their energy transitions, and obviously the long distance mobility, which the National Hydrogen Mission will be focusing on. And obviously the green hydrogen will enable more penetration. So as we move towards this transition, there is no doubt, and the entire world is moving towards that. So there are benefits. Now it is the question of how do we really make that happen, and obviously how do we realize that every citizen of this country is getting that benefit. So such studies will give us an definite. There are certain graphs which are shown by one of the member which was talking about the economical benefits, the health benefits. So there is no doubt that there are benefits. One needs to quantify those. And as we move, and as our commitment of the Government of India is there to move towards energy transition, more and more studies will enable us to understand that benefit more. But ministry, the government is committed towards that 450 gigawatt targets, and I'm sure we will be able to reach that with some programs. And one of them, I think we all know, is the PM Kusum, which actually removes the diesel from the agri sector and brings in more RE energy at the level of farmers. So such kind of efforts that ministry has being taken will realize more and more benefits to the sector side. So I stop here. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. That was very interesting, and your thoughts very well. There is an echo here. So now let me move to the third speaker in today's panel. We have 4 more speakers, and I'm very happy that we have so far stuck to our time budget. We have about 20 minutes more and 4 speakers, so I'm sure we will be able to meet our target as well here. Let me now move to Dr. Praveen Saxena. Mr. Saxena, you have heard the other 2 panelists, you have heard the researchers. They have been talking about the potential of creating green jobs, and then even at the cost of loss of some jobs in the conventional sector, we will be able to create more jobs. So what is your perspective on this? Do you think India is prepared to, we will be able to generate and deploy the larger number of green jobs that would be generated as a result of India's further investment in the renewable energy sector? And if yes, what do you think what is the kind of step being taken by the council, the Skill Council, to train the labor force to meet the opportunities in the renewable energy sector? Over to you, Mr. Saxena.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rashmi. It's a pleasure, frankly speaking, seeing you chairing the session. It's a long time we have not met. Also, Mr. Jagdale, thank you very much for giving beautiful news that we would be, India would be part of the energy transition thing. In fact, these are some of our dreams come true, frankly speaking, who have been in this sector for quite some time, including Mr. Rashmi. I remember when you were in MOEF and how we used to discuss. I'm really very happy that this study has, even though our skill council was part of this, has really focused on the jobs which would be provided by renewable energy. It has been, I have been always saying that having target of 175 gigawatt or then 250 gigawatts and then 450 gigawatts is a opportunity for skilled manpower. But actually, when I see it from the lens of skill council, while it is an opportunity, it is a very big challenge, I must say. And while we have covered a long journey in the Skill Council, which was created in 2015 along with the Paris Agreement. In fact, I'll say it was more coincidental that when we were signing Paris Agreement, we were also deciding that there would be a separate council looking at skilled manpower in the country. And we have developed about 45 standards for jobs and job roles in the country, which would look at in fact all renewable energies and where the jobs do figure. To give a very quick figure, in fact, we have worked out on year basis, if we have to achieve a target of 450 gigawatts, we are looking at people somewhere around in fact 18.5 lakh people who would be working in the renewable energy sector by that time. And this is a number which we have calculated based on the existing things, and obviously most of the numbers arrived are coming out from the Government of India targets. So today, where we employ about 3.95 lakh people in the entire renewable energy sector. It is not only solar, wind, but in general biomass and small hydro, and we have sort of aggregated every number, even though those numbers are little smaller. But we can grossly say about 3.9 or maybe 4 lakh people are at the moment working in the renewable energy sector. And this number is likely to go to about 18.5 lakh people by 2030. If we see not exactly a linear progression, and we have worked on various models on this, it is giving that we will be increasing, we will be requiring additional manpower of about 75,000 every year in next 2-3 years, moving to 1 lakh and then 1.5 or something like that. This is how the progression would happen, which from the skilling point of view and from the sector point of view is a very encouraging scenario. I would also like to inform the audience, the people who are listening, that in the skilling domain now we are moving to the district level plannings. It's a standard thing in government that when you do a program from the central government, it moves to state and then actually go to the district level planning. But the interesting thing is that we are now have started conceiving all future projects where the projects are coming and where the manpower requirement would be there, and try to see if we are able to match that kind of a requirement. To an example, if we see that in Rewa a project is coming, then ahead of time the Skill Council starts generating some sort of training partners there, train them, create master trainers, and start using local manpower to be trained, so that when the private sector moves there, they have availability of skilled manpower. This is how the whole system is being planned, but there is a big challenge. In fact, it is easier said than done that a person can be trained or skilled very quickly. In fact, it is skilling or doing a thing in a very standard manner is a habit. I normally give an example that telling somebody how to wash hands is a 2 minutes job, but pushing this habit to wash after every important work becomes a real challenge. So we are doing that. We are also taking help of international organizations, donor agencies, which have capacity building programs to retrain or upskill our certified manpower. So for example, in solar, GIZ is helping us a lot, and the certified solar Surya Mitras or solar trainers are being picked up and retrained as per international standards. That's how we are trying to do. Same is happening in wind. We are now looking at biomass. In fact, Mr. Jagdale has been really very helpful to us to develop this thing and trying to develop a center of excellence of skilling in Jalandhar. I'm sure he would give us a way on that. Also trying to do something similar on small hydro. So keeping time in view, yeah, I can see your restlessness, Mr. Dr. Rashmi. So I would stop here. Happy to answer any of the questions, but we are very systematically moving to train our people as per international requirements as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Saxena. The very extremely useful inputs which you have given to us in terms of the numbers and the planning which you have. Let me now move to Mr. Abhishek Acharya from the Ministry of Finance, and for his brief remarks on as to how he looks at the co-benefit approach in financing the NDCs. Does it justify the kind of investments which we are going to make in the renewable energy sector? Is it justified on the parameters which the researchers have just pointed out? And how does he look at this? Mr. Acharya, we will look forward to your comments. If you can be brief with the time, we'll be grateful.
Thank you very much, sir. I hope I'm clearly audible here.
Yeah, I think you can take, so that we can hear clearly, you can take the mask out.
Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues, esteemed panelists, and I'm Abhishek Acharya. I deal with the issues on climate change finance within the Department of Economic Affairs. Obviously, it is very much clear that the impact of renewable energy will be having a plethora of co-benefits that we are envisaging in future as well. Just to highlight one issue, that the term decarbonization or net zero, this term doesn't occur in either the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change nor in the Paris Agreement. And India has been doing on the best effort basis the entire climate actions from the budgetary resources, as well as we have already commenced the NDC period from 1/1/2021. It would be an immense challenge for the government of India as well to implement the three quantitative targets that we have already taken. But however, it has been already very clearly pointed out that India has been doing exceedingly well within the targets, especially with the non-fossil fuel energy generation. And I would like to highlight a little bit from the resource requirement side as well, because implementing the NDCs would require a massive amount of resource. And from DEA side, we have brought out a report of the subcommittee on the finance, which assesses the financial requirement for implementation of the nationally determined contribution. And as per our report, which based on the IESS model, it showed that the cumulative costs for energy sector by 2030 to implement our energy targets would require around $5 trillion for the energy sector targets. That would include the mitigation as well as energy targets that we have taken up. So it is very much clear that the resource requirements for the entire implementation of NDCs would be humongous, and this will definitely have a positive spillover effect whenever the implementation go on as we go on with the implementation procedures. Nevertheless, it is also to mention that the implementation of the NDCs would also be contingent upon the resources that we receive from the international community, especially the climate finance commitments that the developed countries have made. And it has been very much apparent that even with the $100 billion per year target that the developed country parties have taken up to 2020, it has fallen. It has not. They have not met those targets by any standard means. So international community has to come forward and have to reciprocate on providing the climate finances as well towards the developing country initiatives, especially the ambitious targets that India has taken with the NDC programs. So definitely we would be looking forward for these commitments to be honored by the developed country parties, and India has been taking most of the initiatives from the budgetary resources till now, from the National Action Plan and all the budgetary initiatives. So these are some of the issues that I would like to highlight. I would stop over here so that I don't exceed my time limit. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. You have been able to capture the essence of the challenges which Government of India has in terms of mobilizing resources, as also of managing its policy framework so well that it doesn't upset any other developmental obligations. Thank you very much. We will have an opportunity to come back to these issues towards the conclusion. Let me now turn to Dr. Nisha Mendiratta. Dr. Mendiratta, your ministry has been instrumental in implementing two of the major missions of the National Action Plan on Climate Change, one on the Knowledge Mission and the other one on the Himalayan Mission, which is more focused on the forestry, biodiversity and ecosystem kind of the Himalayan ecosystem management. And then you have also joined the APEX committee on overlooking the Paris Agreement. So in your role as the implementer of two missions and also a member of the committee, how do you think India can or the policies of renewable energy can help us meet the greater goals of climate change and the social and economic co-benefits which are derived from a renewable energy program in India? Do they justify or do we need to change it? What is your conclusion from a research perspective?
Thank you very much, sir. As rightly put up, that India is really doing very well in terms of making their commitments toward INDC. And my previous speakers from NITI Aayog and from Ministry of Renewable Energy, Finance, they have really made my brief very easy because some of the components already they have dealt with. As already we are aware that India, our country, is now listed as number 3 in terms of this emitters, if we say. And we are really doing quite a lot by joining hands, not only through ministerial level, but also various stakeholders from private concerns are there with us who are looking into the whole task holistically. Now the requirement is to have our policies and programs which already have been defined under INDC, certain themes which have been identified along with energy, because energy is the main focus right now in today's session. And of course in WSDS, as it is geared towards the sustainable environment, safe and sustainable environment for all. So NDC also talks about promotion of clean energy, especially renewable energy, enhancement of energy efficiency, development of less carbon intensive and resilient urban center, because someone spoke about the urban program as well, promotion of waste to wealth, safe, smart and sustainable green transportation network. That is also another issue which also we are looking at. And the pollution abatement. And there are many more things actually in which the INDCs or the National Action Plan on Climate Change, which has been launched by Honorable Prime Minister Council a long year back, having 8 national missions. 2 are being dealt by DST and now 2 more are also added with regard to ocean and health sector. So I would like to just focus my quick brief on one of the target of INDC, which talks about better adapt to climate change by enhancing investments in development program. As Rashmi sir has asked me about the efforts and policies and programs, which we are doing for the topic. So I would like to mention that out of these 8 missions under NAPCC, 4 are targeted towards adaptation. Of course, mitigation things have been spoken by MNRE colleague, and we are well exceeding the stated target, and we are in a very sound footing. And the work shown by Terry today, which spoke about green energy, development of future skills and health prospect, also more or less part of those adaptation program and mitigation program as well. When we talk about various programs, and here the one issue which we are feeling a convergence, or the kind of work which is happening at various programs, there are many major programs with lot of investment by various stakeholders, but there is a need to have a greater networking among all, so that the outcomes are better seen, they are mapped, and then they are utilized for the benefit for the developmental program as per the INDC targets. And we are able to meet various SDG goals if we are able to combine hands from various stakeholders, and we will be able to meet SDG goal number 2 with regard to food security, 7 with regard to affordable energy, 8 sustainable growth, 13 combat climate change, global partnership, and then well-being to all is the most important, which is regarding SDG goal number 3. Coming over to my specific work which my ministry is doing under 2 missions, we are working towards SDG goal 3, in which energy is also one of the integral component. Health and pollution, we have developed the network programs in which, as I was talking about, there is a need to have networking at various levels, from international to national, then to like regional level and local level. So at DSC, we are trying to create this bridging among all the institutions and experts who are working in different domains. And health, aerosol, air pollution, these are certain areas in which already we have started our knowledge network program, and good result is there. Another important thing which I want to tell here is the bridging between center and state, because as a ministerial person, we need to see that the outcome or the scientific evidence-based result should reach to the policy makers. So we have established 25 state climate change cells, and we have given them the task to collate the information on climate change. Energy is one of the important segment in that. And then they're trying to give us a broad picture for their own state. And we have come out with the vulnerability risk assessment atlas as well, and in which various indicators based on state action plan, SAPCCs, they have identified. They have involved district officials, state partners, and they are trying to give us the information at district and sub-district level as well with regard to their state. So there are many more things. Please allow me how much I can mention. Otherwise, there are many things which I would love to. But
maybe you have a minute more. Then we have to go to the other.
I will just come to the crux of the thing, that as mentioned by this important work carried out by Terry, it is a wonderful work in which they have tried to analyze economically also, economical viable solution or the scenario they are providing in terms of few identified sectors. As I said, that various partners are working towards these goals. We need to really join hands at this stage so that we can showcase the solutions, and technologies are also another forte which we need to play. Under DSC, we have developed global technology watch groups also in the previous phase. And for energy sector, coal technology, we have mapped the technologies and we have got good results available with us. And as rightly said, to mention by you, sir, that the committees, apex level committees are also being constituted by our country, considering the requirement, so that like not only we should move in the right path at the right pace, but our achievements, the reporting system, and various aspects such as carbon markets, adaptation, communication, like these are the term of reference of that committee, in which I have got a privilege to serve the committee as a nominated member from the ministry. And I really look forward to have meaningful dialogues and meaningful solutions from all of you. and also from the participants who are there in other sessions of this very important, prestigious WSDS. At the end, I would like to thank organizers to give me a chance to give my views in the very beginning of the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mendiratta. Thanks for pointing out this requirement of having greater convergence and interrelationship between various stakeholders to be able to actually measure the true impact of the co-benefits of the various programs that we undertake for meeting the climate change goals. So very well taken. Thanks very much. Let me now go to the concluding speaker, Dr. Sebastian Helgenberger. When as I was pointing out, he was the central driver behind this entire project, and he has contributed immensely to the evolution of ideas. Dr. Helgenberger, you can summarize the research work, its conclusions, but the question which I had in my mind is that it's quite clear that the benefits are real and substantial of the renewable energy program in India, and we are discussing the future course of its evolution. So how do you think international partnerships can help in further evolution of this program? As Mr. Acharya was pointing out, that international collaboration is extremely important, not only for mobilizing further investments, but also in mobilizing initiatives to contribute to other goals, SDG 3, health, for example, and other related goals. Dr. Helgenberger, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Rashmi. Yeah, thanks for this question. And indeed, with the Co-Benefits project, we have been working now basically around the globe. Lots of work and intense work in India, and very happy to present the fruits of that work today. But it also helped us to look into transitions towards cleaner energy elsewhere, and also to trying to understand how renewable energy performs socially and economically in different countries. And of course, we see that the social and economic performance and the co-benefits of renewables are somewhat different in each country. And so are the conditions under which these co-benefits appear. So the question, how international partnerships can help, like one answer certainly would be that all countries, they can provide mutual inspiration, how things can work, also of course how things perhaps also to point at challenges and how to overcome them, but really seeing that we are all on this way of transitioning towards clean energy, because it not only makes sense for the climate, but also for people, business, and so forth. But it's a learning process for all of us. So providing that mutual inspiration, I think, is an important point. And also in preparing this session, I was also again thinking what we've learned from our work in India, and also, for example, what countries elsewhere can learn from the developments currently in India. And I see in that session this session clearly reflected like the bold, ambitious commitment of India, of the country, of the government in proceeding that pathway towards cleaner energy with really also ambitious objectives and goals. Now, what makes this special is that this is happening in the biggest democracy on earth, right? And what does it mean? Democracies mean that you need to bring people on board, that you need to create support, ownership among the people that are ultimately then also bringing the support for the government and the policymakers that are managing this transition. And that really also puts the social and economic performance of renewable energies in the center of the discussion, because that's what you need to bring the support. And this is, by the way, also a big discussion we have in Germany, to bring people on board, to create ownership in the transition towards clean energy. And now with this ambitious objectives that the government of India set out and is on the way of achieving, this will also give a clear indication to the rest of the world that if you can make it in the biggest democracy on earth, you can then we can be confident this is also feasible in other democracies on this planet, and therefore also is encouraging similar processes elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Helgenberger. It's your this point is very well taken, that it's actually the success of this experiment in a large country like India will be an inspiration for others, and also it will be a lesson. The kind of the challenges which we face in the course of implementing this very ambitious program. This will also throw up many lessons for other countries. May not be similarly sized countries, but other smaller countries will also be able to understand the intricacies involved in making a policy choice, and then finding the involvement of the stakeholders to implement a program like this. Thanks very much. I don't see any many questions on the chat box here from the participants, but I had one or two questions in my mind to some of the panelists. So I'll come back to all of you for your one-liner. Considering this the importance of co-benefits approach, what do you think is the way forward for renewable energy program in India? Mr. Jagdale, can I come back to you? That you, of course, mentioned the various initiatives. You talked about Kusum, you talked about hydrogen in the future. But what is the future of mini grids in India? Kusum, of course, is more or less something of that nature. But how do you see the future?
Thank you, sir. I think basically, we have to take a pride today that the energy access in terms of taking the electricity to every consumer in India, we have considerably achieved that. And therefore, now the challenge is to really see how the renewable energy penetration coexist along with the conventional electricity grids that are reaching there. So obviously, there has been a cost issue which the researchers have already pointed out, and how the subsidy approach can be really looked at to ensure that the grids, the mini grids or the micro grids can really play into. So we need to really, I think they will coexist. We need to make an effort on that. However, the economics also need to be looked at in terms of how the consumer is benefited on a longer run, and therefore more study will be done at the ministry, sir, before I think we move forward on that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Saxena, considering the potential in terms of jobs, you said about almost 75,000 new additional jobs will be required in the renewable energy sector, and you talked of some of the programs. But is there any involvement of the conventional sector here? Do you also envisage there's some retraining for the existing employees in the conventional sectors? You are on the mute.
In fact, you are absolutely right. Skill Council for Green Jobs is very closely working with Power Sector Skill Council, and this is one area where we feel that there is a good scope of recognition of prior learning. I mean, we would like to pick up some of the trained people, typically on the distribution side, on the grid side, and train them on various aspects of unstable or variable renewables. This is one thing which we are already working, and we should be working probably more focused in a more focused manner. A lot of ground is to be covered at the moment. We are also training various distribution companies or electricity boards and their engineers as to how mini grids or microgrids and rooftop systems are supposed to be integrated with that. So, in fact, I would urge all my fellow colleagues that skilling is one thing which we take a little lightly, frankly speaking. Not only in our administrative work, but also in the industry. We feel that everything is possible, but this is one thing which can bring a project with the life of 25 years to maybe few days if the corrections are not made properly. So it needs to be taken little more seriously than what we think. Thank you.
Sir, you are on mute now, Rashmi sir.
Sir, mute. Rashmi sir, you're on mute. Sir, we cannot hear you.
Okay, okay.
Now,
Yeah, am I audible now? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. Dr. Bonu, you talked about the economic survey and the broad things which it has in mind. And then you also talked about the quantification of the health outcomes as one of the possible areas of research. Do you think Niti Aayog is taking any specific initiative in this direction? You are on mute.
Sir, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you. So Niti Aayog is very much into various researchers on energy modeling as well as MNRE, and I'm sure in one of the sessions one of our colleagues will be joining to explain further. I want to add to one thing that I mentioned earlier. I think it's very important to really quantify the health benefits, because these are the benefits that accrue to the nation in addition to energy generation and energy security. And if we quantify the overall benefits, I think it can make a very strong case for need for subsidizing financial subsidies to this particular sector. If I understand, if we want to reach ambitious goal of 500 ambitious goal, I think one of the major constraints will be the financing to the private sector. The report also talks about reducing the financing costs from probably currently around 15 or 14% to 8.5%. So how do we make a strong case for it? Because in addition to financial returns, there are also a lot of economic benefits to the nation. So I just felt after reading this report, these are important impacts and outcomes and impacts of MNRE, which are not yet properly fully quantified. So that's my intervention.
Thank you very much. On this positive note, I think we look forward to much greater work in this area and guidance and leadership from the Niti Aayog. Abhishek, you talked about almost $5 trillion of investment required for a renewable energy program in India. But it's important to bring the costs down, and otherwise the program might not succeed, at least in the long term. So, and then generally in all such cases, when the costs come down through an appropriate business model, it is only then that the industry picks it up. So, what do you think? Do you think it will entirely play on the back of policy direction from the government of India, or the business will pick up this kind of target on its own because of the logic of the costs, the falling costs in the renewable energy sector?
Thank you, sir. First of all, the entire cost cannot be met by the government of India, obviously. It has to be for the generation of finances. It's not only the government, the public money that has to be involved. We have to involve the private money as well. So there has to be some sort of policy directions which will induce private sector participation towards the renewable energy sector. And obviously, India has been taking very strong strides in this direction as already. Talking about the International Solar Alliance is a very positive stride that we have already taken, as well as there are various sorts of innovative financial instruments that may be devised, which will attract private sector initiatives and private sector participation towards generation of finances which can be channelized towards the renewable energy sector, and which will again have the leveraging effect of bringing down the costs as well. So there has to be a mix of policy which will encourage both the private sector, the public funding, as well as and leveraging effect on the private sector participation as well. And as I already have said, that the NDC initiatives are contingent upon the reciprocation from the international community, because ultimately the entire climate change regime is based on the responsibility paradigm. So that that particular aspect has to be emphasized also, because international community has to reciprocate towards their commitments that they have already made, and in future for the NDC period with the new collective goals on finances as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Mendiratta, you have already talked about the need for a convergence and greater involvement of all the stakeholders. But it will be interesting to know if your ministry has anything in mind about evolution of a measurement framework of this kind of co-benefit measurement as part of the measurement of the climate, the impacts of the programs that we have initiated under the climate change mission. Your mission is also relevant there. But it will be good in coordination with NITI Aayog and DST if they can evolve a framework and push for it under the under the guidance of IPA.
Yes, sir. As already mentioned by Professor Banu earlier regarding OOMF, NITI Aayog is doing only quite in a reformed manner this time, this monitoring framework which they have evolved. In that, various parameters they have taken up, considering the missions, not only mission, all the schemes are thoroughly studied by them, and a framework comprising of various indicators has already been defined by them, in which is actually meant for the ministries. And as these missions are being implemented and coordinated by all the nodal ministries, so I feel one step is already met through NITI Aayog's OOMF framework. Now, sir, the second step of monitoring is through the high-level Apex Committee, ECCC, which is being, they are reviewing our program regularly on yearly basis, and which is again chaired by Honorable Advisor to Prime Minister, sir, where they are giving us various directives that how we need to move, energy being one of the important sector in that. But of course, apart from these two, another big exercise which is being carried out by Department of Science and Technology is formulation of a new policy. We are calling it STIP 20. This is Science, Technology and Innovation Policy, which is now segregated into 6 thematic tracks, and climate is one of the important segment in that policy, which is again comprising of various recommendations, in which, as mentioned just now, the dialogues or the public-private partnership, involvement of more and more players into this game, and the implementation, monitoring, various recommendations are there, and this draft policy is right now available in DST site. So I request everyone to please go through that, give your comments, especially for the thematic track of STIP policy on climate change. We will be very thankful, and it will again give us another step towards achieving this goal for climate change. No?
Okay.
That's what I want to say.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mendiratta. Dr. Helgenberger, your one-liner or last comment which you would like to make based on the observations made by other panelists?
Well, as I think Joint Secretary Jagdale and also Dr. Neha Pahuja have pointed out before, it's crucial to substantiate, to quantify the argument of co-benefits, of how renewable energies or in the transition towards clean energy performs for people and businesses. So I think this is a crucial point here. And the second one, which also Dr. Neha Pahuja has pointed out, also in relation to the mandate of the Apex Committee, is the communication part, letting people know about that. And also thereby changing the narrative that also implementing the climate agreement is not just about taking responsibility for future generation, but for current generations. So the communication part and bringing out the message is also very important. I think this is something we can take home, and I'm very glad that we, with the co-benefits project and also this report, have taken a small contribution towards making that happen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Helgenberger. With this, we have come to the conclusion of our panel discussion today. It has been an extremely rich and invigorating discussion, your observations have actually summarized it all. I don't have to do it again. Also, because Neha is waiting in the wings, the budget is for the time is already over. But let me thank once again all of you for the extremely insightful discussion that we have had today. It's quite clear that, and I'm very happy to note that the key stakeholders from the government, the NITI Aayog, the MNRE, the DST, they're all united in their view that this program has extremely rich, substantial, and important co-benefit. And perhaps the takeaway from this discussion is that we need to evolve co-benefit measurement framework, which can be integrated into our climate change missions. And based on this, the investment or the actions taken by the ministries, the other stakeholders can be guided. They can take this framework as the guiding framework for evolving their policy actions. So it's not just the financial investment results or even the results in terms of emissions, but the co-benefits in terms of the other SDG benefits that are also that need to be taken. And we need to evolve a framework for this purpose, a scientific measurement framework. And I'm sure with the leadership provided by Mr. Jagdale, Dr. Shekhar Bonu, and Dr. Mendiratta, we will be able to have this in place. And if we can have this in place in a short time, I think we will consider it a benefit and a very productive outcome of this discussion. Thank you once again. Thanks to all the panelists.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice time.
Thank you.
Over to you, Neha.
Thank you, sir. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the distinguished panelists and to you, Mr. Rashmi, for taking your time and giving useful insights on energy decarbonization journey of India, or energy transition to renewables, so to say. We are glad that you saw relevance of quantifying the co-benefits of sustainable development goals and in a way found the project outputs relevant and useful. I hope this also finds some mention somewhere in the policy making and India's NDC. Finally, I would acknowledge the strong partnership that we have with the IASS and express my gratitude to the research teams at TERI, at Council for Energy and Environment and Water, and the Skill Council for Green Jobs for providing the case studies. And also like to mention that the project outcome was built through in a process with inputs from various ministries, including MOEF, MNRE, Ministry of Power, NITI Aayog, Ministry of Finance. And I give my sincere thanks and gratitude to the members who were present, who provided their inputs. Also, my thanks to the project teams in Germany, at ISS, IIT, UFU, and RENAC, and the funders of the project in terms of providing good support, IKI. Thank you so much, and thanks for your participation and your deliberations today in the event. Thank you so much.
Just a parting thought, Neha. If the questions which have appeared in the chat box, if you can send it to the concerned panelists, maybe they can reply and it can be collated so that the answers can be clearer and we can have a much more informed discussion in future.
Yes, sure, we will do that. We have a list of questions which Aanchal had been sharing in the chat box, but I think it was not clear. I would share that in an email just after the event. Yes, okay. Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.